Seriously, you have to stop recording Zoom calls. Just because you can't be in the same place as your guest doesn't mean you have to rely on terrible audio and bad latency. It's so much easier. Just use StudioLink, and I'm going to show you how. Hi, my name is Joram, and today I want to show you an easier way to do remote podcasting. StudioLink is a tool that's not very well known, but it's perfect to record remote podcasts when you can't be in the same location as your guests. And the best thing, it's built right into Ultraschall. We'll talk about why it's so great later. Now I want to quickly show you how it works and how you can use it. So as always, I prepared a little sample project here, and in this case it's actually really simple to do that as well. If you want to have a sample project where you have your own track and a track for your guest, you go to your podcast menu, you select a project template, StudioLink and soundboard, and then you get exactly the setup that you see here. Another way to introduce a StudioLink track is again through the podcast menu, insert StudioLink and soundboard tracks, and then insert StudioLink track. And yet another way is to simply use copy and paste on your track and add them. You want to have as many tracks in your project as you will have guests connected to you through StudioLink. You can connect up to 6 people that come right into your DAW, and for each of those you want to have a separate track. So they're not mixed together, they're all on their individual tracks. Then when you have your project set up, you can go to your browser where you find this tab already open. This tab opens whenever you start a new project with a StudioLink track in it. It starts the background service and connects to this tab. This tab is your interface for StudioLink for everything that you have to do concerning the connection. And all of the audio is then routed back into Ultraschall. The advantage of using StudioLink like this, directly connected with your DAW, in this case with Ultraschall, is that whatever you do in Ultraschall is routed back into StudioLink, and vice versa. Everything that happens in StudioLink ends up straight into Ultraschall, so you have one place where everything comes together. And that means that whatever you have connected for your sound interface or your soundboard in Ultraschall will be connected to your guests. In this case with the soundboards, it's very easy. I can just play any of these musics here. And you see how it's directly sent through StudioLink to my guests, and they can hear it then if they're connected. And that also means that if you have an interface with multiple audio inputs, so you have multiple local tracks, you can still get somebody call in through the remote track through StudioLink. So if you're ready now to actually call your guest, you can either give them your ID and they can call you through StudioLink, and what that looks like we'll see in a minute, or you just call your guest. So your StudioLink ID can be one of two things. It can be a random combination of numbers and letters for the free accounts, or if you pay a little bit of money, you get the option to choose your own name that is then linked to your ID, and then people can simply type that in. You don't have to type the part after the @ signs, you just use the letter combination in the front. And now if I want to call somebody, now I have here a test account that I can call on my other machine. I hit the call button and I'm connected. On my other machine, I'll show you in a second, I can simply accept the call and now I am connected. And as you can hear, I get my own voice played back because my computer is right next to me with a different microphone. I will mute the other one now so it doesn't get too confusing for myself, but this is how you are immediately connected. And you see there's a very small latency there, and that's sending the entire audio right over the internet. So it's almost as if you're at the same table. So when you're connected, you can simply go into Ultraschall, hit the record button. So you see for every single connection that you have in StudioLink, you get a track here. So if I add some of the test accounts, for example, music, you see how that's played on the one track, and now I have the other track as well. And you see how these tracks are immediately filled with the audio from StudioLink. So when I'm done with my call, I simply hang up with the red button. And now I can go into the edit mode by prepare all tracks for editing. Like always, whenever you're done with your recording, you hit this button and you start editing. It turns off the StudioLink in the background. So this is important that You only press that when you're really done with your calls. If you press that too soon, then you have to set up a new project when you want to resume the call, because all of the stuff in the background that controls StudioLink has been shut off as soon as you press this button. So I'm not going to press it right now. And instead, I'm going to show you now what it looks like from the other end when you call someone. There are multiple ways to be a guest using StudioLink. The most sophisticated one is probably simply using Ultraschall as well with the same setup, and then you can just call each of you having their own Ultraschall setup. This obviously is more work, and I only recommend that for people to podcast more regularly together. It has the advantage that each of you can play their own soundboard, for example, or have other things connected if that's something that you want to do. Much more common will be the use case that you use the other two ways of connecting to StudioLink. The first one is a free solution, and this requires the use of the StudioLink Standalone. If you go to the address that's also linked in the show notes, studio-link.de, you can download the software. This is the big black button here that says in German, download now. And then you find here the download section. You pick the right version for your system and you simply install the app. When you launch the app, depending on the system that you're on, you'll see different things happening. On Windows, you see the app running. You get a terminal window that you have to keep open. You must not close that. And you get a browser tab. On Mac, you only get the browser tab and the app that's running. So this is the interface that I get when I start the StudioLink Standalone. You notice that I have a different ID here. So on the same machine for every installation that I have of StudioLink that's in my Ultraschall or in the Standalone, I have a separate ID. Also, you see that you have many more controls in this interface because a lot of the controls here are stuff that you usually set up in Ultraschall. But this is the Standalone that doesn't require Ultraschall. So we quickly go through them. The first thing is your audio interface. You simply select the system that you have connected. In my case, that's the Scarlett Solo interface. The right input channel is 0 for me. And the output is also the Scarlett Solo USB. I simply hit reload and close. And now I have that set up. I have a big mute button here, so when I press that, my audio is not sent, and if I depress it, obviously my audio goes through again. Then I have a big recording button here that is very useful because it saves a local recording of your audio to your machine that you then can later send to the host of the call if they require it. Because if the internet connection is bad, for example, you might get some stuttering or some other artifacts in the audio that is sent over the internet, but you probably won't have these artifacts on your local recording. So this is always handy to have that as a backup. Also, it records all of the host's audio that is sent to you. So this is just a good backup to have in case your recording breaks on one end or the other. The button next to it opens the folder location of your recordings. I'll show you that in a second. And the on-air button is something that we won't talk about today, but just that much. You can very easily stream live from StudioLink Standalone to the internet, also from Ultraschall, and that is StudioLink On Air. So if you want to have a live podcast where people can go to a website and listen live as you are recording, there is a button for that. And then you have the same caller interface as you have for the StudioLink built into Ultraschall. So if I want to call someone, it's as easy as typing the ID, pressing the call button, and now you see in my other tab, I'm receiving a call. I'm not going to accept this now because I don't want to have any weird feedback going on because I've selected the same audio device, but this is how I do the call. Of course, it also works the other way around. That I simply, if I'm a guest, I simply copy this code over here, this ID over, send it to my host, and the host calls it, and then you have the opposite. I get the call coming in from my other ID. This is the Standalone. This works very well. It has one downside though. You have to install this app. And depending on the management of your machine or of your guest's machine, it might be that they are not allowed to install any piece of software. If they use, for example, a company laptop that has a very restrictive Windows management policy. And therefore, sometimes it's easier if you are anyway on the web interface already to simply have somebody use a web interface to call in. This is done with StudioLink QuickWeb. Just upfront, StudioLink QuickWeb is not a free service. You have to pay, I think, €5 per month to get access to that. But to me, it's absolutely worth it because you create a link that is tied to your own StudioLink ID and you can send that to people. Just like here, you see this is directly set up to just call my ID and I can send that to somebody. They can type in here their name and then you simply follow the wizard. You allow the website to access the microphone. You select your microphone that you want to use. You do the echo test. You know that from other software as well. Test, 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 test. I could hear myself there. And then I press call if I'm ready. And just like before, I'm getting a call here and it says the name of my guest up here in the line. And I can speak to my guest. Again, I will not accept that right now because of any feedback. As a guest, you also have a mute button where you can mute yourself, and you also have a record button. And when you record something, your recording will end up in the browser and will be downloaded in the end of the call. It will ask you for permission, and then your file will be downloaded. You find that in the download folder. And then again, you have a local recording of only your track in this case. Now I want to give you a couple of quick tips how to best set up your StudioLink. The first thing is during your setup in Ultraschall, what you really want to make sure is that your magic routing order is toggled on, because this will make sure that all of the tracks are correctly routed within Ultraschall, so you get the mix minus setup. This is a professional term, and it just means that everybody can hear everybody except themselves. And this is often something that's hard to replicate if the software doesn't have it built in. In this case, Ultraschall does it all for you, as long as you have this button pressed and make sure that you keep it pressed. So whenever you have any problems, make sure that this button is pressed and the routing is done automatically by Ultraschall. If you still have issues, you have a couple of test accounts that you can use. The first one is something that we've already seen. That's the music account. This simply tells you if you are connected to the StudioLink network and if you can receive audio and hear the audio. If you want to see if you can send audio, there is an account called Echo. Hello, hello. And you see you get an echo of your own voice that's played back with the delay of StudioLink, essentially. In this case, you see this is around 100 milliseconds. And this makes it really hard to speak because you hear yourself back with this delay and this just messes with your brain. But you can use that to test whether your audio is going out and also whether you picked the right microphone, because the echo call is exactly what your partner will hear when you do the StudioLink call. It sends the same audio through the same channels and it just plays it back to you instead of to your partner. If you can hear music and if you can hear the echo, then that means your side is set up correctly. So if your partner can't hear you, then it's a problem on their end. They might have not plugged in the headset properly, they might have turned down the volume, and that's why they can't hear you. So you also always have the level meters here that you can see, so if something is sent, you have the green bars that move around. Now I want to show you another very handy feature, that is when you use the standalone and you don't want to use Ultraschall for whatever reason, how do you actually get your files into your DAW? So first I'm going to record something. Just a couple of seconds so I can show you the files. And if we have that done, I'm stopping the recording. Now I simply press the folder button. And this opens my Finder, in this case on Windows, the File Explorer, and it creates a folder that's labeled with the date and time. And in this folder you find all of the recordings. And you see you have a local .flag that is your own recording, and then you have 6 remote tracks. It will always record all 6 tracks, even if you're not connected at all or only connected to one person, and it's simply numbered through the connections. So first person you call is number 1, second person you call is number 2, and so on. You also see from the sizes that only the ones that actually have something in them are increasing in size, while the others aren't, just sort of empty shells. And this means you don't have to worry about creating sort of useless audio files. They're very, very small. Only when there is something recorded in them, they start to grow a little bit in size. And still, they're rather small. So for an hour of recording, you're looking at 100 megabytes, roughly estimated. So if you want to import those, let's say I have something on all of these tracks, I simply select all of them and I drag and drop them into my DAW. And I'm using Ultraschall here, but you could use Adobe Audition or any of the other software that's out there that does multi-track editing. Ultraschall asks me now if I want to put this on separate tracks or single track. I'm selecting separate tracks, and you see I have all of them here, and they all have the same length and they're all already in sync, so I don't have to synchronize anything. I don't have to clap at the beginning and then synchronize the clap across all of my tracks. They are already all in sync when I use this method, and now I can simply edit them and do whatever I want with them and do my show. What I always do is I ask my guests to record on their end and then have them send me their local.flag through whatever means, like a Google Drive or an iCloud shared link, and then use their file as a backup in case something went wrong on my end with the recording because of the internet connection. Because I live in Germany, our internet isn't great, so sometimes there are breakups and noises and stuff in there. So I use that as a backup that I can then use in place of the actual recording that I have over the internet of my guest. You might have noticed that StudioLink doesn't provide any way to see your guests as of now. But fortunately, Sebastian Reimers, the one person behind StudioLink, already announced that at the end of the year there will be a major update to StudioLink, and it's partly also due to the financial support of the people using and paying for it. In this update, he promised to also include a way to see your guests through a video channel, so you have everything built in. Until then, the workaround that I always use is that you simply use a video communication software like Zoom, like Teams, like WhatsApp video, whatever you have at hand, and use that in parallel. Just make sure to mute yourself on this other channel and only use it for the picture. All of the audio is coming through StudioLink at a low latency. So that's it. That's why you should use StudioLink when you want to do remote podcasting with your guests. I hope you learned something. I hope you will use this for your advantage. Thank you for watching. Do all of the things with the YouTubes that you do nowadays. Subscribe and whatnot. Thank you and goodbye.